How many of you are engaged in business currently as a founder or key participant in a business? How many? Okay. How many are aspiring to do so at some point in the future? That sounds like a pretty good percentage. So our next panel is going to continue this delving into the issue of how we connect with the community. I think you saw from the previous panel discussion, there's some tension around this issue of how do we effectively engage the community to address issues in the community, and how do you do it in a way that doesn't seem like somebody is riding into the rescue. How do you empower the community as opposed to treat the community? So this next panel, I think, is very important for addressing the issue of how we effectively engage with the community. So I'm going to bring up the moderator of the panel. But I'm going to let you guys get in and sit down for a minute. How you guys doing? So this is the session 2, Community Engagement Strategies. And we're fortunate to have with us today as a moderator, Rishi Moudgil, who is the managing director of the University of Michigan Center for Social Impact. And he's been doing work here in Detroit for a while. He has a really outstanding group of panelists, so I'm going to turn it over to Rishi.
Thank you, David. All right, folks, we don't have a lot of time, and we got a great topic to tackle here today. I want to thank you all for coming out. My name is Rishi Moudgil. As David introduced, I'm at the University of Michigan. We recently launched the Center for Social Impact, which is really a collaboration of a number of activities that we're doing at the university in order to collectively think about how we can create positive social outcomes. And we're based at the Ross School of Business, but we're very purposely looking at our engagement strategies as broadly focused. In other words, we know that to solve real problems, you can't just have a business approach. You can't just have a policy approach. You can't just have social workers working in interventions in isolation. And so really, this is why we put this panel together in that same thought, in that same vein, is for us to really work on urban issues. We really need people of different backgrounds, different skills, and different thought frames. And so, one of the conversations we've had a lot is what's an urban entrepreneur? What's a social entrepreneur? What's an entrepreneur? Why do we even use that word, entrepreneur? Okay. So I know you all go through those motions as well, and for us, the labels aren't as important. The idea of social impact and impact in general is the outcome. Have we lifted communities? Have we made the situation better for those that are engaged and involved? And so you're going to hear from the different sectors here today. We have folks from the city, we have in government, we have folks from higher education, we have community organizers. And we're going to talk a little bit about our community engagement strategies. And a little bit, then we're going to have a Q&A with you to hear what your questions are after you hear about some of the approaches that our panel has pursued. So let's get to it, shall we? And we'll just go down the line, and I'll ask our panelists to just introduce themselves very briefly and then talk about an experience they've had, an approach they've taken in order to truly be inclusive in their approach to urban entrepreneurship.
I moved to Newark, New Jersey from Chicago about 5 years ago to work for an inspiring mayor who's now U.S. Senator Cory Booker. Before that, I headed a shopping center group at a national real estate firm that I headed urban development, trying to convince retailers to find opportunity in urban neighborhoods. And before that, I had an entrepreneurial company where I developed and sold single-family homes and townhomes in ethnic and urban neighborhoods. So building and making urban communities better, I found very early on after law school was my passion. And engaging with community, I remember the first meeting. The first question of the first meeting after I made my big presentation about how our project was going to make the community better, so a lady in the back of the room stood up and she said, sounds like a good idea, but anything For us, without us, is not about us. And I remember being sort of taken aback by that. I still remember it. Those words were sort of searing at the time. And it became really a mantra that as I went on to do more projects in Chicago and Baltimore and Birmingham, Alabama, and Newark, New Jersey, it became something that I always thought about early on. How do I get people engaged in our thought process and our planning process as early as possible so that we get impact, we get feedback. Secondly, even if there was a big project that was going to be impactful, we started to think through how do we make sure that impact economically, in some instances, or most instances, is really felt and experienced and community residents have an opportunity to participate in as well. So I'll give two quick examples. We built the first Target department store in Baltimore. Huge project. Baltimore was a declining shopping center. The mall was, it's called Mundalman Mall, but the nickname was Murder Garlin Mall. And so we had this opportunity to transform this asset that had been, really something that the community, a place where they shop, but not a place where they enjoy shopping. Everybody had a memory at the mall, not all of them pleasurable. Our challenge was getting the retailers to see the opportunity there, but also getting the community to feel like this wasn't something that was just being imposed on us, even though everyone said, oh, we need more shopping options, we need better retail. And so once we fought the fight of getting Target to say yes to the store and incentivizing it appropriately, we started to, roll out the plan in various small community groups. And out of that, there was a $75 million project. Out of that, the community felt great. Look, we want the shopping option, but are there going to be contracting opportunities? The shopping center was across the street from a Duke Ellington High School, and the band didn't have band instruments, and the swimming pool wasn't open for 15 years before that. And so we negotiated into our deal with Target what we called at the time just a community benefits agreement, where we had minority participation, local contracting in building the Target store. We had a contribution to purchase new instruments for the high school and open the swimming pool. And we had this ongoing community advisory group that we looked to once a month to just inform about the process. Most of it was information. Here's what's happening. Here's who's been hired. Who's been hired. Here's the schedule. That information to the local residents was empowering. And that example of information, connecting them to the contracts, getting people involved in the early process, getting the impact felt on the most basic level, band instruments in the high school, all helped make our big urban redevelopment project more successful and more impactful, and more people thought this was something that was for us and with us.
Thank you. Next, Cornetta.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cornetta Lane, and I guess I'll start off with a story. Last year, I was scrolling down my Facebook newsfeed, and I came across an article published by Model D Media, and the article read, West Corktown, creating Detroit's newest neighborhood. And I thought to myself, that's interesting because how can you create a new neighborhood in a city as old as Detroit? And so I clicked on the link, and to my surprise, it was about my neighborhood. A couple had purchased a bank on Michigan Avenue, and they renovated it into a living space. And the article said that it was the epicenter of West Corktown. And I, again, thought to myself, like, wow, like, I've lived in this area for about 26 years, all my life basically, and it was called Core City, not West Corktown. So a few months later, or I should say the next year, this year, I was awarded an opportunity to participate in a fellowship called K880, and it was backed by the Knight Foundation. And I thought, who else in Detroit is experiencing this rebranding of neighborhoods? And so I used my Facebook posts to gather some friends together to talk about rebranding in Detroit and what does that mean to them. And together, we were able to create an engagement campaign called Core City Stories. Core City Stories is a bike tour that includes stops along a route in Core City where residents use their front porch as a stage to tell their story. And the stories were about the history of their neighborhood as they know it. The stories really helped to put a face to the neighborhood, Core City. And it also, according to Miss Parnell, who was the first storyteller in the bike tour, really revived her sense of pride in the neighborhood. It was truly a community organizing event because I didn't create a real digital campaign because in my neighborhood there's a great digital divide. And so again, with my group of friends, we went door to door, we knocked on doors, we gave out flyers. And I also realized there aren't a lot of bikes in the neighborhood, so I found Fender Bender, which is a biking group in Detroit, who had a bunch of bikes who would be willing to transport those bikes to the actual event. And we had people come and rent the bikes for free. It was a free rental. And I didn't allow registration online because, again, that digital divide, I wanted it to be on equal playing ground. So if you arrive early, then you got a bike. If you didn't, but we did also allow, we also hosted a walking tour. So it was biking as well as walking for individuals who just didn't want a bike or didn't have a bike. But the whole purpose was to make it accessible for everyone. It was open to all Detroit, but we specifically targeted the Core City neighborhood just to make sure that they felt included in the event. And it was a success. And we can ask questions later, I guess.
Thanks, Cornetta. Next we have Garlin Gilchrist.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Garlin Gilchrist II. I'm the City of Detroit's Deputy Technology Director for Civic Community Engagement. And when we are thinking about community engagement from the city's perspective, this notion of inclusion is super important because the city government exists to serve the entirety of its citizens. And one of the things we've been trying to work really hard on is to reestablish that relationship, reestablish that trust, and reestablish that standard for service and service delivery. And one tool that we've been using for that type of engagement is something we've created and released this past April called Improve Detroit. So for folks that grew up in the city like I did or have lived here for a long time, you will, over the years there has been, I would say, a decay in confidence in the city's ability to hear a problem when it's reported to them, knowing where to call, who to call to say this tree is broken, who to call to say this street light's out, who to call to say that there's dumping across the street from my house, there's an abandoned vehicle, et cetera. There's this real spaghetti mismatch of things you could do to let the city know there was a problem, but none of them, even as a collective, really gave you a confidence that if you did any one of these particular tactics, that a real person would hear it and respond to it and the thing would get fixed. So one of the things we tried to do is to really streamline the process for handling these sorts of non-emergency service requests. So that's what Improve Detroit is. It's a platform that's available in 3 ways. And to get its inclusion piece, this is why this is important. So the primary way to engage with it is via a smartphone app. City of Detroit happens to be a city that has pretty high smartphone penetration comparatively across the country. The second way you can download that from the App Store or Google Play Store. The second way to engage with Improve Detroit is via the website, detroitmi.gov. And the third and most important way is you can actually engage through it by simply calling a phone number. So if you call the mayor's office, for example, and you want to say that, there's a tree that's blocking the sidewalk on my street, you can call the mayor's office, and what will happen is you will get the same level of service via this platform that you would if you used your smartphone or your website. On the back end, what we did is for every service that's available, there's about 20-something services, from everything from you can report water running in an abandoned building, you can report dead or diseased trees, you can report broken traffic signals, you can report about 20 different things, illegal dumping, etc., graffiti. We have identified and actually streamlined the process to make sure that the right people in city government will get that request. They will acknowledge the fact that you made a request via the app or via the website. They'll send you an email acknowledgement saying that something happened and we received it. They'll let you know their status. Hey, we created a work order for this. Someone's going to be out to fix it on this date. We expect it to be done by Y date, and you'll get a confirmation when it's actually done. You'll be able to see issues that other people have reported. And we're really thrilled with the success of this, not because there's been, tens of thousands of requests that have come in through this app since April, but really because it's something that's been utilized across the entirety of the city. Every city council district, every census tract, any way you can slice and dice the city, every neighborhood is virtually equally represented as far as how the requests have been distributed. Far east side, far west side, north end, southwest, doesn't matter. Everyone has been using this platform equitably, and to me, I think it's a really good example of success by trying to deliver a high level of service to as many Detroiters as possible.
Thank you. Finally, Dan Pitera.
Hello, everyone. Do I press? Hello, everyone. Am I on? Sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry I'm late. It's been a crazy morning already, and I think it's only going to continue. I am Dan Pitera. I'm with the Detroit Collaborative Design Center. We're sort of architects, landscape architects who work with businesses, work with a variety of people, and through trying to find ways to get engagement and participation come together. And so I would like to begin by actually trying to distinguish between the two, because in the world we're in, we oftentimes hear the two be said the same time. So a neighborhood planning process, we'll say we're doing a civic engagement process for the neighborhood planning. Well, actually, that's really a civic participation process that may engage with systems of engagement that the neighborhood may have or may be connected with the systems of engagement, but it really isn't an engagement process. It's a participatory process. I'd like to be clear about this because participation is about actually project-based things, and civic engagement are the systems, like you were just talking about, that run through people, run through communities, run through areas. And those systems are very important to make sure are constantly renewed, and the people who keep systems together are actually people. So for us, we constantly try to distinguish that. A lot of our work, people say, oh, you do civic engagement. No, actually we do participation that pulls together and maybe folds with the community's engagement systems. We do not invent, we do not come into a community. We are invited to be a part of their civic engagement. Now, when we are working with businesses and thinking about, well, let me start with a story as well. I've been asked to speak at a thing in Chicago in 2 weeks, and the topic they asked me to speak on, which I went ahead and changed, was saying the upside of gentrification. And I said, I didn't know there was an upside to gentrification. So what can you talk more? And they couldn't necessarily explain what they meant by that. And I said, are we trying to search for an upside to gentrification? Or are we trying to, so I think maybe where they were coming from is communities, many communities, if not all communities, like to see investment, but they like to be included in that investment. They don't want to be rebranded unless they are asked to be rebranded. Like they are wanting to shift their community. And I'm saying there intentionally because none of us can live in every single community, so I'm a part of a community, but when I'm working in another community, I am a part of that dialogue because I've been invited to be, and not going in to shift that dialogue and to try to rebrand it. So if a community wants to be rebranded, that's great. Then we can work on that. But how do you have investment without displacement? That's the key of thinking this. And that our dialogues and thinking about how new businesses are started, entrepreneurship, how can we think about that? And it goes down to everything, the words we use. I will throw a word that's become more and more commonplace is the phrase, especially within folks in here and maybe folks we work with, is the word placemaking. That word actually makes me cringe. I'm thinking that everybody is trying, and communities are trying to make place, and frankly, the folks that are now doing placemaking look like me, and we are propagating places that come through our culture and not a community's culture. So I'm saying all this to think about what is placemaking mean in Southwest Detroit is very different than placemaking and what it would mean in Northwest or a neighborhood in Northwest and so on. Thinking about even the words we use and how we then work with each other is very key to our thinking as you work with a community. So I'll pause there and stop there and just say that to us, words of like engagement, participation, thinking about our connection with each other, and how do we celebrate expertise, and how do we think that and understand when we are invited to the table. If it's not for us, it's not for us, and so on. That's so key to our way of operating, and should be a way of everyone in the city operating, in any city. So.
Thank you. So a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts. What we want to make for this session is your interaction and your engagement. So we're looking for some questions from the crowd. I'd ask you to specifically address to one individual as opposed to the entire panel. If we can get a couple opinions on a topic, we definitely will. We've heard a lot of things here. Dan has challenged us about thinking about language and meaning behind what we are saying, civic participation versus engagement as one, placemaking, the language we use, and more importantly, what we mean behind that. And I'm just recapping small points, as everyone said a few things. Garlin really presented us with different channels of communication. In an urban environment, that's really important. How do you think about the ways that you are going to engage? What are the levers of participation that are truly from and within the community? Digital is one that obviously we spoke about too. Cornetta had talked about response, about personal needs, identity, how these issues really can leverage personal individual interest into doing more with the community and along with the community. And of course, Lyneir gave us an example of a corporation coming into a community, and one or two of the mechanisms that they used, an advisory group and other ways to think about how they're a part of the fabric and not simply someone coming out and helicoptering in and creating big walls. So just some of the concepts here. What are some of your thoughts and questions? Let's get it going. I saw a hand in the middle.
And I would, I know you asked them to direct it to a single person, but I asked for other people to respond with me if they have other responses or contrary to what I'm going to say. And that is, I think that the actual, I'm not actually even, I think we should learn and love and respect the past we have, but we could move forward without being locked into the past. So I'm not even necessarily thinking that placemaking has to draw from a distant history, but just of the place now, the people of the place. So let me give two examples, one right in the area. Detroit Fiber Works, just north of 7 Mile, just south of Outer Drive on the west side of Livernois Avenue. They're a fiber business, and they grew out of the community storefront that was on Livernois, right across the street on the east side of Livernois Avenue. They are working right now, you can find it on Patronicity's Patronicity campaign. They're working right now doing a series of workshops with community members on creating fiber. And then they're going to take that fiber and design, with a bit of help with us in the community, a installation of that, of sort of a thing that takes the community art that was made and puts it on the median on Livernois. And if anyone is familiar with the median on Livernois, the median itself has caused this sort of antagonistic response to the area, and they're really not very happy with this. So they're saying, we're going to create and we're going to actually take ownership of the meeting, do it ourselves, and create a place. They're not using the word placemaking, but they're trying to create a place that grows from the folks that made the stuff by hand. That's one example. Another example was, you can see these in Southwest Detroit. I'm going to talk about a trip that I was giving a talk in Kansas City, and then I'll be very quick and done. Where I was brought into a neighborhood, and when I go to places, because of our work, they take us to low to moderate neighborhoods to show off the neighborhoods and what they're doing and so on. And so they're taking me by place to place, and I asked, can you tell me who lives in this place? And I said, do they come from a Latin American descent? And they looked at me and they said, I don't know. And I said, well, you don't know the residents in your neighborhood that you're showing. But I said, I have a feeling, I'm not trying to overgeneralize, but I have a feeling looking at their front yard, they had a fountain and they had paving, and it felt like a civic space. It felt like a place where people would meet. And I said that feels like a place that was designed by someone, by probably the family there, that comes from a Latin American country. And sure enough, someone walks out the door, about 5 minutes, 10 minutes later as we're walking, and it was very clear, again, not to overgeneralize, but that person came from, we then spoke with her, and she came from Mexico. That space is so different than the way a white person thinks about a front yard of a lawn and so on, and it really is quite beautiful and speaks differently of how people, so it's not even referencing a history of like time and place, but of how we as people connect and interact. And so that's part of what I mean by that, hopefully that's clear, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you for that question. So in the Improve Detroit example, I think is one way we're trying to make sure that the benefits of any technical improvements of service delivery that we're having can reach Detroiters regardless of their connectivity status. So in the Improve Detroit example, it's being able to like call from the phone. So like my grandpa, for example, that lived in St. Mary's in Santa Maria, like whenever he has reported a problem, he reported a pothole on 6 Mile between Greenfield and St. Mary's. And he was able to just call a number, and then he was able to basically submit an Improve Detroit request through that channel. We're trying to make sure that things like when people have information requests, we released a city open data portal in February this year that's based off of our open data policy, which basically gives people more insight into city operations, when permits are issued, fire incidents, crime incidents, things like that. We've worked with our staff people at places like the Northwest Activity Center and other rec centers, where if they have information questions but they don't have access to the internet but want to get these types of questions answered, they can go and speak with staff people that work there in person who can get that information where they're working from the same source, but they can have a human interaction to be able to get the same digital information. So we're trying to be as thoughtful as possible about different avenues for people to access the information that we're making available. On your question on internet access, yeah, depending on what study you read or who you ask, you got somewhere between like 40 and 55% of Detroiters who don't have consistent access to high-speed broadband internet access, and that's a real robust problem. And I think there's one of the opportunity spaces is frankly there are a lot of interesting community partners, nonprofit organizations, and for-profit businesses that are trying to address that in neighborhoods. One, I'm gonna speak selfishly because I'm a board member of an organization called the Allied Media Projects that's been doing some really interesting work in different neighborhoods in the city around training citizens to create mesh networks that can blanket their communities with internet access. That's an interesting model to look at, how it can be scaled on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. But from the city's perspective, we are trying to figure out the types of partnerships that we can make both with companies and nonprofit entities to be able to deliver internet service to different parts of the city, whether that's working to put internet hotspots in the hands of Detroit school children as a way to reach their families. So we know that like Detroit Public Schools, for example, serves about 48% of students, but that's a little more than half of the households in Detroit. If we were able to give each one of those kids a hotspot, for example, that's reaching a lot of those families that may not have had internet activity before. And it also has the benefit of having them be able to do homework, which something like 60+% of homework assignments are better accomplished or more quickly accomplished by a student who has internet access. So we try to be creative, and frankly, it's an open book, and I would challenge, frankly, all of the people and organizations who want to find a way to partner with the city to try to partner with us on that problem. And I think that that's something that we are very, very, very welcome to new and creative and bold ideas to help solve the problem that I personally want to solve for as many Detroiters to get them as connected as possible, because that just opens up so much opportunity.
Yeah. Biggest asset. Quite honestly, it's courage. Seriously. When there is an issue that arises in your neighborhood, or if there's something that you see, it's really easy to turn a blind eye to it. But of course, you guys are all entrepreneurs, right? So like, you see problems and you fix it, right? No, I don't think that's true. But it really is. It's courage, and it's also the people that are around you. I found that if your why and your purpose is very strong, then it's really easy to get people on board with what you have to say and what you think. Again, my why was very strong. Core City was in danger of being called West Corktown. In fact, there's a website called West Corktown, and there's also a Facebook group that has over 1,500 likes, which means there's over 1,500 people in Detroit that believe that West Corktown is the actual neighborhood. And so for me, my biggest asset was, again, just speaking with my friends and rallying people around my purpose, which is to preserve the historical identity of my neighborhood.
Thanks, Cornetta. Lyneir, let's ask you this question. Through some of your work, how have you gone about connecting and working with local leaders and organizations, maybe beyond the example that you gave?
So now at Rutgers, I lead the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship, and we intentionally open the doors to community leaders. And it really is events and programs like this. We must host 30 or 40 events every year where you're inviting people in around a topic really to listen and, sort of share knowledge about what's going on. So we will give the politicians an opportunity to speak. We'll give community thought leaders an opportunity to speak. We'll find interesting local entrepreneurs that will talk about their business plan. This whole movement around social entrepreneurship and folks who are trying to solve problems, with the social problems with the business model. Again, opening the doors, putting thought leaders in front of a room and having, anyone challenge the ideas, add to the thought process. We found that to be a meaningful way to engage.
You're right about memories. So Lauren Hood, who I think is in the back there, yeah, hey Lauren. So she actually has an organization called I Was Here, and it is all about resurrecting those stories in Detroit. I think stories is one way to do that, to kind of showcase the people and the memories even that were here. But because storytelling is kind of like a lost art, right? Not a lot of people find value in it, but I think there's a resurrection of that that's happening in the city with a lot of storytelling workshops that are happening. Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers is happening. But storytelling, yeah, it's a major tool to getting those memories out. The next piece of my work is to be able to do photo essays of each of those people who participated in the storytelling and have it in a printed as well as in a web-based format so that those stories can live beyond the day that it was told. So yeah, I guess another piece of that is storytelling. Storytelling has the ability to, move masses, to change opinions, to change perspectives. If you can master your story, you can change the world, in my opinion.
Well, the channel, the Improve Detroit channel that I described is a feedback mechanism itself, and it also has the benefit of someone being able to be like, you said that thing was fixed, but it's still broke. Like, you can actually do that. We also publish on our open data portal actually in real time when requests are submitted, when they are completed. You can look to see if service level agreements are being met really in real time. We track that internally as well. So I think we're really trying to show our work here in terms of this is actually how it's happened, this is what's coming in, this is how we're addressing it, and it can be judged out in the open whether we're being successful in meeting the promises that we made.
And I think there's a huge opportunity there. So much of the work is, it's anecdotal, so it would be great to really figure out a methodology to document, Did people get jobs? Was there impact? Did property values increase? Was the real crux of the social problem addressed? Are people spending more? Those type of questions, I think in an organized, consistent way, not just this was best practice or this would happen, that was exemplary in this project. To put that in an organized, consistent way, I think is a great research opportunity.
So I'll wrap up by saying also on that point, it was a great last question. Oftentimes when we approach a lot of the things we're trying to engage with or solve or work through, again, we're working in our own little corners. And to your point on outcomes and impact and storytelling, I think it's across the board, right? There's some ways you can present data and show your point. There's some ways you can say a simple story and present your point. There's sometimes that you can go through the institutions, and there's sometimes you can go through individuals. So I think that's what this sort of room can be very helpful with, is continue to show what those impacts are through the lens that you're most comfortable with or that you have access to, and I think that'll help our path. Let's thank our panel for today as well.
So we had a DSL line, and we contacted some of the larger ISPs, and they quoted us $50,000 to run.